Today is the kind of day when the kid cries and the mom does not even show up to help. Because besides an epic sacrifice, we are about to watch one of the biggest beatdowns anyone has ever taken in their entire miserable life. Shaka says it is not smart to just blurt it out right away. People need to actually pay attention. The old man warns that the moment some sneaky journalist finds out, it will spread all over the world. But the giant robot says there is a chance they can manipulate the info. So they decided to stall a little before dropping the real bomb. They said these mind waves will broadcast worldwide, hacking the Navy's system and creating one massive transmission. The Marines tried to shut it down but could not stop it at all. The tavern cook is completely lost and asks why he is hearing Vegapunk's voice. Saturn and Kizaru are still trapped in Luffy's grip like flies in a spiderweb. Shaka says they need to wait until everyone can turn on their video Den Den Mushi, and Luffy spots the helmet dude, who says they will wait 1 hour so the whole world can get ready. Saturn is in shock, asking what they plan to reveal. Vegapunk says 1 hour is way too much time. Nami and Usopp start whining that while they are doing everything to escape, Vegapunk is just chatting away. But Chopper and Tinhead find it weird because they heard Shaka's voice even though he got shot by York. Not even Edison knew what the heck was happening. The giants marched through the forest with huge grins because something big was about to go down. They kept searching for the Straw Hat. The Marines joined up and the giants called them a bunch of idiots. The soldiers fired and caused a massive explosion, but it did not even tickle these monstrous warriors. They hit back by smashing their axes into the ground and sending everyone flying, destroyed that human anthill in the blink of an eye. Meanwhile, Vegapunk says he will give them 10 minutes to get ready. Innocent Luffy says, as usual, that Vegapunk and Shaka are still alive and kicking. Now it was time to wipe out those government trash. Over in Marijois, the Celestial Dragons wanted to know what kind of broadcast this was. St. Marcus asks what happened to Vegapunk. Saturn replies telepathically that Kizaru killed him, and he saw it with his own eyes. Top man El Bigodon says he could only have left a message programmed to trigger after his death. They needed to find the source of the broadcast as fast as possible. It had to be somewhere in Egghead's Labia Stratus, protected by a barrier. The only thing they knew is that if Vegapunk reveals the truth about the world, Imusama will shred them to bits. While waiting for the 10 minutes to pass, the old man goes to grab a coffee. In Dressrosa, the people start realizing something, saying that the famous Dr. Vegapunk is trying to reveal something to the world. Everyone rushed to the plaza to watch on their video Den Den Mushi. At this speed, the signal would barely make it before the speech ended. Rebecca arrives from training, ready to watch the broadcast. Leo and Kabu show up asking if this is the scientist Luffyland held hostage. But Rebecca tells him to stop being dumb because this is obviously government lies. Lucy would never do something so cowardly. Hiro says it looks like Vegapunk is speaking freely and on his own, so he is probably not being threatened by anyone. In Fuchsia Village, the people were also getting ready. They thought it would be about Luffy doing something bad again. They said this truth about the world thing is total nonsense, but they were still curious. The village is poor and could not even afford a video Den Den Mushi, so they would just listen on the radio. In Water 7, everyone started waking up in the middle of the night. Iceberg immediately tells his maid to get the video Den Den Mushi ready, but the girl was sharp and had already turned it on. She even set up screens at all the shipyards. In Morgan's magical balloon, Wapel Windhead is completely confused. The parrot explains that Vegapunk is broadcasting this using Navy tech. Vivi asks where Luffy and the others are, but Morgans calls her dumb and tells her to check the timestamp on the recording. This is not Egghead's current time, so these images must be pre-recorded. He says the place must already be worse than hell after a buster call, and he wants to make a headline about this story that will shake the world. Vivi can only pray that Luffy and the others get out alive. In West Blue, everyone is ready for the broadcast, saying this scientist is crazy for chopping off his head and sticking an Apple antenna on it. In North and South Blue, people are curious about what he wants to say to the whole world. And in the Three-Legged Women's Kingdom, they are drooling, calling Vegapunk the old man on the boat. Shaka says it will take 10 minutes to brew the coffee, but at this rate, nobody will even get a sip. Ivankov starts laughing at Vegapunk's head, which is way smaller than last time. Koala asks if these are the famous copies of the Doctor. Morley wants to know how he can broadcast this message while being held hostage. Sabo asks Dragon if Vegapunk will really reveal the truth about the world. The absentee dad remembers the conversation he had with Shaka months ago, saying he he knew he would die soon, and he keeps thinking that is the only thing he has done since the anime started. For 28 years, Dragon has literally done nothing. No fighting, no escaping captivity, not even showing a little power to us. At Egghead, the giant beaver is almost there while carrying Frankie and the others, and the giant robot is stunned when he comes face to face with the warrior's ship from Elbaf. That was Great Irek, and they would set sail as soon as the bosses returned. Bonnie is worried, asking if Vegapunk will come back safe. He will, girl, trust him. The Gorosei are calmly watching the broadcast as if time is on their side. Luffy says that even after all those punches, the bearded guy is still intact. Borsalino tries to catch him off guard and shoots a laser from his eyes, but Luffy barely dodges and says that as long as his friends are not free, these two will go nowhere. He hits a Gomu Gomu no Donshibaru, sending Saturn and Kizaru flying with a massive kiss. Stuck together, this is the famous "till death do us part." They get so flattened they look like Aladdin's magic carpet. Luffy starts spinning them like pizza dough. He says that since the horned guy always recovers, this time he will send both of them to the ends of the world. He throws them to the moon and starts cracking up. The Marines see something coming toward them from afar. They take a Gomu Gomu no Kizaru right in the face as a warning. A whole warship explodes and Saturn is next, but the bastard regains control and heads back toward Luffy. Caught off guard, he almost has a heart attack from shock, asking why nothing can hurt this old rascal. Kizaru is just a limp coat on the deck, thinking back to the moment he had to stab Vegapunk. The Gorosei tell Saturn that time is running out. They cannot let Vegapunk reveal everything he knows. Luffy dodges all the Gorosei's assassination attempts that have now finally stopped spinning. He glares at Saturn, who looks even uglier, like a sick pig, and he begins the incantation. Out of nowhere, a blue flame and a pentagram appear on Egghead's ground, and they also appear in Mary Joie in front of the Gorosei. That fat butt better get off the couch and activate the world government's overpowered mode. Suddenly, the weather in Egghead flips and a sinister black lightning strikes. Luffy is shocked, asking what the heck is going on. Sanji says it looks exactly like when the old spider showed up. One demon was not enough, so now all 5 are coming to turn Egghead into a nightmare. Pinocchio says they really want out of there, but Zoro and Jinbei haven't arrived yet. The Fishman says he's almost there. The battle isn't over, but he's gonna drag Zoro in. I want to see him jump into this mess without turning into tuna tartare. Tiger Boy is full-on raging, and Zoro even more so. Rob Lucci lands a storm kick so strong it splits the forest trees in half. Mid-air, he runs into a strike from Zoro and has to tank it with his iron body. Zoro blasts into infinity, ready to shred some jaguar meat, but suddenly a sinister presence shows up and shocks them both. They're wondering where the hell it came from. They pull back to gain speed and strike again, but that monstrous aura returns and terrifies them both. Zoro's Enma even takes flight because now it identifies as a bird, and by now you know whose monstrous haki that is, right? And no, surprisingly, it's not Jinbei. Rob Lucci says he's sure Zoro felt that haki too, because it was spreading all over the island, and right after, they're back to trying to chop each other's heads off. After searching forever, Jinbei finally finds them. Zoro charges with blood in his eyes at insane speed, punching a hole through the sky like it's nothing. They're moving so fast, it's basically impossible to follow. But then Sanji drops a Discord message that Zoro's slowing everyone down and is just dead weight. That went straight into Zoro's ears, and he went full-on berserk, because getting called dead weight by a fried pastry chef is one of the ultimate humiliations ever. Tiger Boy struts toward him, activating his power. He unleashes a terrifying aura and hits with a Shigan. Actually, multiple Shigans, spawning a bunch of hands and raining blows like a Shoryuken storm. But Zoro dodges everything like it's in slow-mo, eyes closed, just to flex his superiority. He zigzags, jumps off a rock, and fires a Santoryu Kokoba. Madara Gari! Rob Lucci freezes, stunned by the sheer force. It's like Zoro turned into a demigod overnight. He slices Lucci up like he's making an exotic jaguar coat. Even Jinbei's jaw drops at all that raw power. He had no idea there was a demon king in the crew. Meanwhile, Luffy's inside Jupiter's stomach, almost getting swallowed whole. He stretches his arm out, the jaws almost closing, nearly stuck, but the monster gulped down his backside super fast, and he wriggles free. He yells at the worm monster that it tastes terrible, but just as he thinks maybe it might taste okay, Saturn grabs him and spins him like a hula hoop. Now he's getting revenge for what the kid did to him and Kizaru, slamming Luffy into Pumbaa's attack. Luffy gets dizzy and ends up back inside Jupiter's mouth. This old dude is way too hungry for Luffy. Seriously. Finally, help arrives. Dory and Brogy show up grinning, saying they saw a familiar face. They declare that a dark place doesn't suit this man and rush rush to help the Straw Hat. Dory blocks Saturn's swings and throws him back, while Broggy smashes Topman's face. They grab the horns of each of these horned dudes and slam them together, landing a double beefcake smack. Bro code is at an all-time high. The two giants rush in because Jew Peter's the next target, using a sunsaw to decapitate the Gorosei and yank Luffy out by force. The kid pops out, cracking up, shocked to see the old giants. They say they couldn't just sit around and had to see the Straw Hat. Luffy's grinning so hard he's blushing. Now these three are about to wreck these half-baked Gorosei. Marcus Mars was flying across the island, radiating that monstrous haki. Jinbei shouted, "What the heck is that?" The beast was radiating pure rage, so they had to get out of there, fast. He went to grab Zoro, shouting it was time to go, but the swordsman wasn't having it. He said the fight wasn't over yet because the tiger was still alive and breathing. Problem was, he was barely standing and was spitting strawberry juice everywhere. Sanji asked if Jinbei had managed to get the mossy-haired guy out of the fight, but Rob Lucci was already ready for round two. The fishman grabbed Zoro, saying, "You already won." Lucci kept crawling forward, and Jinbei apologized for the chaos, then hit him with a water-powered karate strike so strong it sliced trees in half. Lucci even reverted back to human form, jaw dropping when he saw a giant flying chicken barreling straight at him. He asked the CP0 agent where York was. Zoro couldn't even process the size of this monster. Lucci reported York was trapped in the control room on the 4th floor. The two escapees? That was Roronoa Zoro and Jinbei, the Sea Knight. Up above, 5 more Straw Hats and 2 Vegapunks were prepping to sneak out the back. There were also 85 Cypher Paul agents and 4 Seraphim trapped in the basement, and only 6 minutes before Vegapunk's broadcast. The beast approached, impressed, saying the agent was truly remarkable. No further questions. But as the Gorosei started leaving, Lucci spoke up, asking if his friend inside could be spared. The parrot replied that isolating one bug is impossible when you're about to wipe out the whole hive. Meanwhile, Luffy was yelling that it had been over 2 years since he'd seen the giants. The big guys barely recognized him in this form. They'd heard tales of this god of Elbaf and wanted to know where he got that NIKA outfit. The kid had no clue. And they had bigger problems to deal with before having a chat. Saturn muttered that these giants were going to be a real problem. Dory noted the monsters looked just like those from Elbaf. Luffy said they didn't have time to fight. They had to escape, but the bearded guy told him to chill. Sanji had already explained everything. The message got through. The crew would regroup on the other side of the island. The giants said they came to help the Straw Hats after reading the papers, especially seeing them trapped by the Marines. The kid had no idea about this news. When he heard he'd gotten villain fame for kidnapping Vegapunk, he laughed his head off. Time to get back to the ship. Dory sounded a giant trumpet that echoed across the island, so powerful even the ships were shaking. Olmo reported that the bosses had spotted the Straw Hats, ordering everyone back to the ship. The other giants laughed at the Marines. They were only there to save the Straw Hats anyway, since there was no treasure to plunder on these ships. Topman noticed the escape signal and said he wouldn't let it slide, and decided to play a little tune for them. He inhaled so hard through his nose, it felt like he sucked all the oxygen out of the room, then let out a terrifying scream packed with haki. Luffy was dodging like crazy, but buildings started exploding and catching fire. The Marines were in shock. Those black lightning strikes were back. The King's haki was so absurd. Even the weaklings fainted 2 kilometers away. Even the giants had to hold themselves back or risk flying away. Luffy was laughing midair, his body starting to fall apart like Mr. Potato Head from Toy Story. The giants were stunned, and Dory planted his sword to hold Luffy together. This was just plain bizarre. The kid started sticking all the pieces back together like some kind of sticker album. Broggy asks if he's okay because he looked like a jigsaw puzzle, but he says he's all good, and Dory cracks up, saying his body is just plain ridiculous. Still, that King's haki roar was dangerous. The boar starts scraping its hooves on the ground, calling them bugs. The Elbaf warriors ask who this pig is, and the Straw Hat explains it's a big-shot government guy. Top Man spins like a Beyblade, screaming he's gonna wipe them out. He turns his horns into blades, but Dory and Broggy block the strikes with Svalin's solar shield. The Gorosei ask if they even realize the mess they're making. The duo just shrugs. They're protecting their buddy. Then they launch that pork ball to infinity and beyond to roast some enemies later. But Saturn scoffs, calling them a bunch of bugs. If they're friends of the Straw Hats, they'll get exterminated too. He launches a rain of grape juice, and Luffy screams to watch out. It's poison. The kid's so hungry he bites into a tree and turns it into a baseball bat. He grabs a bucket of paint from the portal of imagination and shines it up. He puts on a helmet, swings like a pro, and sends every ball right back to the owner. They charge at the Gorosei, and Luffy's jaw drops as everything explodes. The Elbaf crew shouts that the flames block the forest. Perfect chance to bolt. But they have to hurry because these guys are basically immortal. The giants admit they've never heard of a race or skill that's immortal. Yet the beasts keep rising from the ashes like phoenixes. The three goofballs march, singing and celebrating their escape. Meanwhile, God Usopp leads a team to pull the grounded ship free. Robin's napping while Nami yells at Jinbei and Zoro to hurry. Their boots are failing, so running it out by brute force is easier. The beaver giant and the others are nearly at the ship, but three vice admirals are waiting to beat them down. The Hornhead says he won't let Bonnie escape. Sanji hears a weird noise somewhere. Back at the broadcast, Shaka warns Stella to drink the coffee. Time's running out, but it's so hot, he keeps burning his tongue. York watches the chaos, screaming to get her shackles off. Even Kaku says she's too loud, and Stussy tells her to zip it. She stops shouting just as Marcus Mars lands right on top of them. He asks where the room broadcasting the video is, but York nearly has a meltdown dealing with that talking parrot. On the marine ship, Kizaru's still down. Doctors ask where he's hurt to patch him up. He says it's a deep wound, but all he needs is rest. Meanwhile, in the flames, the legendary robot Emeth rises for the first time in 200 years, calling the name Joy Boy. He rips a giant stake from his chest, and somehow this robot is bleeding. The Marines shout that the Elbaf ship can't leave, but they freeze when the ground starts shaking. They look up and see a Megazord stomping around like nothing happened. The battalions report that on Egghead's northwest coast, something way bigger than the giants appeared, and fire doesn't even faze it. It crushes everything in its path, and even apologizes to Joy Boy for some reason. Baldy Nashuro was slicing through Pacifistas non-stop, chopping those giant robots like a hibachi chef on steroids. The Marines saw their chance to get back to Egghead. After all, they couldn't let Emperor Straw Hat Luffy slip away. Nashuro could not believe Vegapunk gave a 12-year-old kid the power to nuke an entire country. The giants were heading back to their ship, and the Marines wanted to sink it before they could escape. Vice Admirals stood in their way, and Frankie yelled if they were that desperate for attention. Red King, that cone-headed dude, cranked his power to the max, screaming that no one was getting through. Frankie's giant robot rolled up like, "Move or get mowed down!" They squared off like two dudes about to kiss, but changed their minds and threw punches instead. And the Vice Admiral got absolutely humbled by Frankie. He talked big, but ended up eating pavement. Pomsky charged at Bonnie, yelling that she was not taking those weapons. So she told a giant to look after her dad. The Marine fired at her midair, but Bonnie dodged using her jet boots and told that clown not to call her dad a weapon. She slapped his face and turned the mustached man into a snot-nosed brat. Then she kicked his teeth in and kept pounding him just to vent her rage. Atlas came flying in hot and blasted guillotine with a massive, ultra-mighty punch. The guy didn't even have time to blink. Bonnie shouted that the Straw Hat still hadn't arrived, so they needed to get off this island fast. The Vice Admirals got back up, screaming again that they would never let them escape, because failing meant losing their heads. Meanwhile, up in the Leba phase, York was losing her mind. She was chained up while a giant parrot monster stared her down. She begged him not to eat her because she doesn't even taste good. Debatable. Marcus Mars unleashed his hockey, shattering York's chains, and demanded to know where the broadcast room was. She should know. After all, she is a Vegapunk. York could not believe this creature was one of the five elders, but before she could finish her sentence, he started snacking on her. Back in the broadcast room, Shaka asked if the old man was not going to drink his Vega coffee, but Vegapunk snapped that it was too hot. Pythagoras joked that they all knew the geezer could not handle hot drinks. Only 4 minutes left until the big reveal. York led the giant bird to the room where the video was recorded. He asked if she was sure, then dropped a nuclear-sized bomb that blew the whole place to dust. York screamed that he was insane. Blowing it up would not change anything. The broadcast was still rolling because obviously the real transmission device wasn't there. York told him exactly that. If she were Stella, she would never hide the Den Mushi in the same room where they filmed. The Gorosei just said fine. Then he would blow up the entire lab. York panicked, explaining that would make things worse. The second floor was full of weapon prototypes, and the first floor powered the whole facility. Not to mention the gas tanks. If they blew, Punk Records would go with them. So the parrot freak told her to start thinking, since her brain worked like Vegapunk's anyway. York shouted that she wanted to stop the transmission too, because if they kept committing crimes, it would ruin her dream of becoming a celestial dragon. Then suddenly, the bird monster heard the voice of someone insignificant, and York realized it might be the transmission snail itself. He said it looked like a tiny spiral shell with a pretty suspicious shape. Then the Gorosei told York to take him straight to that Den Den Mushi, and she gave him a grin so sneaky it could sell stolen candy to kids. The two of them flew off, and Stussy finally breathed in relief. Then roasted Kaku, saying nobody even cared about him. The nosy pigeon boy asked what kind of monster that thing even was, and the blondie said it must be one of the 5 elders. Pinocchio laughed in her face, saying she got ditched even after betraying CP0, but she told him to chill. She chose to stay behind herself because someone had to complete the final mission. Kaku was totally lost, and even back on the Sunny, Nami could not believe they were just leaving Stussy behind. Edison explained that the barrier had to close the moment they escaped with the ship, and it could only be controlled from the control room. That is why Stussy volunteered to stay. Robin pointed out that thanks to her, they could break through the barrier, but they would not be able to fly nearly as far as the Vega Force would have carried them. Edison ran the numbers and said that, according to science, the ship was absolutely going to crash and burn. Nami almost had a heart attack, and Usopp shouted that the explosive cannon was ready. As soon as Zoro and Jinbe showed up, they could blast themselves toward the sea. But when Chopper explained that it still would not be enough to reach the ocean, the long-nosed freak froze in terror. The tin head started laughing, saying they were going to need a miracle, but he declared that he was a scientist, so he would make sure their ship landed safely on water. He blasted off, and Lilith chased after him, screaming for him not to do it. Edison shouted that this kind of damage was nothing, then slammed straight into the barrier and blew everything up. Lilith fell to her knees, crying her eyes out, unable to believe what she just saw. Out at sea, the Navy ships were almost flying through the air. The wind was so wild, it was dragging everything back toward the island. Mountains were crumbling, and some unlucky soldiers ended up inside the mouth of Jupiter. The massive worm was sucking in all the air, and even the giants of Elbaf were struggling not to get pulled in. Despite their strength, they could barely move. Poor Luffy was the first one getting dragged away, but right before he got slurped up for good, he used Brogy as a springboard and launched himself away from that living vacuum cleaner. He kicked so hard he split a whole building in half. Dory and Brogy stumbled back. He juiced himself up like he just took 2 doses of pre-workout, turned into a muscle monster the size of a bodybuilder, and leaped with a skyscraper on his back, yelling, "If that overgrown worm is so hungry, he can eat this rock instead." Then he hurled that massive chunk of debris straight into the Gorosei's ugly mouth. The Elbaf giants burst out laughing, saying Straw Hat just maxed out his aura level. But right after the throw, Luffy's energy ran out, and he shriveled up like a raisin mummy. The big bearded guys freaked out, asking why he suddenly turned into a skinny grandpa. Luffy shouted that he needed food, and Brogy handed him something called Hakarl, a dish so stinky it could clear a 5-mile radius. Even Luffy, who would probably eat a rock if it looked tasty, hesitated. That stuff was fermented shark, Elbaf's emergency rations straight from nightmare cuisine. The rubber monkey started eating it, and immediately regretted every life choice that led him there. But suddenly, his energy shot back up, and he bulked up like he just downed a gallon of pre-workout. Out of nowhere, Topman came charging in to catch up with the crew, and the giants yelled for everyone to watch out for the boar. But Luffy roared that he was fully recharged now and jumped straight at Pumbaa. He activated Gear 3rd, packed with armament haki, and launched a blazing red rock that could melt steel. The hit was so brutal, it left the boar dizzy, but that thick hide was tougher than expected, and Luffy was the one who got hurt. The crew used the chance to run while they still could. Meanwhile, on the ship, Lilith was sobbing her heart out over Edison. Then another explosion shook the area, and they heard a creepy spider crawling up the walls. Turns out Saturn got tired of getting smacked around by Luffy and decided to pick on the weak ones to feel strong again. Down below, the vice admirals were completely wrecked, and the crew was about to board the Elbaf ship when disaster struck. One coward sliced the giant from behind. Everyone froze in shock. It was none other than bald-headed Nusjuro in his hybrid form, eyes glowing red and ready to massacre every pirate in sight. Meanwhile, Marcus Mars finally reached the secret room. Only 1 minute remained before Vegapunk's big truth reveal, and the Gorosei walked in calm as ever, like time itself was on his side. That smug old man had found a transmission snail on the floor and told Vegapunk his luck had just run out. At last, Vegapunk's grand broadcast begins, the truth that will shatter the world. Marcus Mars stood right in front of Punk Records, the biggest brain on the planet, still running even after Vegapunk kicked the bucket. And if you thought old Applehead's noggin was already huge, wait till you see the size of that floating balloon brain taking up the skyline. The old man says he'll keep the transmission going, but he's worried if people will believe what he's about to say, because once they hear it, there's no turning back. Over in Syrup Village, Usopp's pirate crew was panicking. If even Kaya, the rich girl, didn't have a video snail, what chance did a bunch of broke wannabe pirates have? Mary said those video snails were massive anyway, but hey, at least they could still hear Vegapunk's voice. And Kaya, she's clearly saving herself for Usopp when he finally comes home. Lucky man. Kaya said Dr. Vegapunk revolutionized medicine with his research. On a marine ship, the operators reported that the real broadcast was about to start. Even at Twin Cape Lighthouse, Laboon popped up to listen in, while Crocus prayed Vegapunk wouldn't spill the beans he feared he would. Back in Vegapunk's hometown, everyone was watching proudly. An old man called him the pride of Baltimore, while a kid asked if Vegapunk caused the island's disaster, but that one was definitely Frankie's fault. Far away in the Bird Kingdom, where Chopper once studied medicine, the locals realized the transmission was coming from the same island as their little raccoon doctor. They joked that Vegapunk had built more weapons than Tony Stark on a bender. Meanwhile, over at Hachinosu, pirates were torn between fighting or tuning in to the breaking news. Back on Egghead, Marcus Mars stomped down to crush the transmission snail, but the fool fell for the oldest trick in the book. It was just a decoy. The real snail was hidden somewhere else. The Gorosei were foaming at the mouth in fury, shocked that they'd been duped so easily. And even with a brain that size, Vegapunk's Alzheimer kicked in. He started introducing himself all over again. The other elders ordered Marcus Mars to shut down the transmission, but he admitted he'd been tricked and needed more time. The show had officially begun, and the long-armed tribe folks were cheering like it was the Super Bowl. The bird elder muttered that the big-headed scientist had over-prepared because the video was running on auto and couldn't be stopped. York revealed that Vegapunk was continuing the work of the Ohara scholars, and the 5 elders turned whiter than a ghost in a snowstorm. This wasn't just a message, it was the sequel to Professor Clover's final words. Meanwhile, Sanji was sprinting faster than a man late on rent. When he heard Bonnie screaming for help, his love instinct kicked in full throttle. When he got there, he saw a massive bald horse freak raising a sword over her. The old man shouted that Bonnie would never steal their military power and swung to slice her in half. But Sanji went turbo mode, yelling that Bonnie only had eyes for him. And after this arc, the FBI might have something to say about that. He flipped through the air and landed a blazing kick right on Nusjuro's chin, sending blood flying everywhere. Then he mocked him, saying the Straw Hats weren't going to go easy just because he was an old-timer with back problems. But Nusjuro caught fire, transforming into a demonic skeletal horse straight out of a nightmare. The monster bit down on Sanji, knocking Vegapunk's body off the edge, but Atlas dove in and caught him at the last second. Not that it mattered much. The old man was already one step away from becoming a memory. Frankie tried to land a massive right hook, but the horse-faced geezer blocked him, ready to stomp them like roaches. That's when Kashi and Oimo noticed their buddy Soja King's crew was in trouble and jumped in like nightclub bouncers, grabbing the elder by both arms. Sanji broke free but fell headfirst straight into the ground. If he were a regular human, that would have been instant hospital time, but since he's built like a cyborg Ken doll, the worst he'll get is a stiff neck tomorrow. Bonnie activated her distorted future and grew as big as King Kong on steroids. She was towering over the actual giants now. This girl could use the elder as a welcome mat. She leaped to crush him, and his face looked like someone just hit him with a +4 card in Uno. Meanwhile, during the broadcast, Vegapunk admitted he had committed 2 unforgivable sins and could be arrested or killed any second. So he programmed the video to start the moment his heart stopped beating. Everyone froze, realizing the old man was already 6 feet under. People in Sabati started bawling, and even Caesar and Sanji's deadbeat dad freaked out. Their lifelong dream was to surpass Vegapunk's genius. Meanwhile, that gossip vulture Morgans was losing his mind because Vegapunk had just dropped the headline of the century, ruining his scoop. Before his message began, Vegapunk told everyone not to judge whoever ended his life, even if they looked like the devil himself, because what he was about to reveal would melt their brains. Up on Egghead, the Straw Hats came face to face with Saturn. The crew froze, asking if anyone had enough bug spray to take down that giant spider. Though let's be real, they'd need a whole factory to even tickle that thing. The monster told them to move aside since he had no time for insignificant insects. But Robin froze the second she heard his voice. It was the same one she remembered from the Hell of Ohara, the voice of one of the 5 elders. The old man recognized her too, calling her the foolish girl that Akainu failed to kill. Nami demanded to know what that demon was talking about, but as Saturn's tentacles lashed out, she screamed for everyone to protect Robin at all costs. Brook froze and snapped one of his own legs. Usopp blew another up, and Chopper went full tank mode to shield Robin while Nami pulled her out at the last second. Even Zeus got the message. Everyone went all in against that demonic spider. Meanwhile, Marcus Mars was shaking with rage trying to locate the broadcast's signal, but there was so much life on the island that he could not track it down. York was freaking out like an unpaid intern afraid of losing her big shot at becoming a celestial dragon. Vegapunk kept speaking, saying that what he was about to reveal might sound insane, but humanity deserved to know the truth. The Gorosei held a Discord call, and Marcus Mars suggested blowing up the entire power plant to stop the broadcast, but Saturn called it a terrible terrible idea. He said he did not care if every Marine soldier got wiped out, but if they blew up the lab, they'd never be able to recreate the Mother Flame, the weapon Imusama wanted so badly. Then came the moment that silenced the entire planet. With eerie calm, Vegapunk declared that the entire world was going to sink into the ocean. The Marines were frozen in disbelief. The fishmen and mermaids were celebrating because it meant it was finally their turn to inherit the Earth. And the Gorosei were losing their minds, screaming Vegapunk's name. So yeah, my friend, anyone with a devil fruit better start shopping for floaties, because when this ship goes down, swimming is not an option. And now it makes perfect sense why the celestial dragons live up in the sky. They'll be the only ones still dry when the rest of the world goes under. At Marine HQ, the soldiers were losing their minds, asking how in the world the planet could possibly sink. Everyone thought Vegapunk had finally gone senile, and Akainu looked ready to punch a hole through the wall. Meanwhile, in Mocktown, the locals were cracking up, saying the old man should quit science and try stand-up comedy. They said he was just using his death as an excuse to mess with the whole world's head. I mean, a planet swallowed by the sea? That's a tough sell, even for a mad genius. Over at Fishman Island, everyone was terrified, and Shirahoshi worried about what would happen to Luffy and the crew. The Marines weren't sure if Vegapunk's message was true, but one thing was certain: the man had thrown the world into chaos, while York ran around like a maniac, terrified that Stella was actually revealing everything. Vegapunk's voice echoed through the transmission, saying that if his calculations were correct, a massive earthquake would soon shake the entire world. People started freaking out, because that exact quake had just happened, exactly as Vegapunk predicted weeks before his death. He said the sea level would rise by 1 full meter across the globe, making some islands completely uninhabitable. He warned that folks could ignore him if they wanted, but this disaster wasn't natural. It was man-made, a deliberate act by none other than the world government. That's when Saturn went berserk, smashing everything in sight. Nami called Zeus, and he blasted a thunderbolt right into that wrinkled demon's head. Brook followed up with a morning serenade, freezing Saturn's brain like he just chugged a bucket of ice cream. Lilith fired her bubble blaster, and Usopp launched a bean straight at his face. Not that it mattered, because it barely scratched the guy. He swung back with those creepy claws, ready to shred everyone. Chopper tried to shield the crew in his defense form, but even that wasn't enough. The monster called them worthless insects and flexed like he'd just taken 3 doses of gym juice. He stomped the ground so hard it sent everyone flying, but Robin was quick and created a net of hands to catch the crew just in time. Saturn ordered them to get out of his way and charge straight through Chopper, trampling him like a bug. He nearly crushed Nami and the others too, but decided to keep going. Because now, stopping that transmission was far more important than dealing with a bunch of nobodies. He asked Mars if he'd checked the power plant yet, and said he was heading there himself. That lab had to be protected no matter what. Vegapunk said that wishing for peace was his very first sin. He once dreamed of creating infinite energy to bring progress to the world. Meanwhile, Saturn stormed into the power plant and came face to face with the Mother Flame, a weapon so powerful it could erase an entire country with a single blast. He even dropped his monster form to take a closer look, and when he spotted a Denden Mushi, the first thing he did was smash it like an angry boomer seeing TikTok for the first time. But of course, the transmission kept going, and the Elder lost his cool. Marcus Mars went berserk, tearing apart everything alive in the lab. Out at sea, Marine ships kept firing at the giant robot Emeth, but nothing they did could bring that beast down. Luffy, meanwhile, was spinning around like a malfunctioning Beyblade, completely dizzy. The giants yelled at him to quit fooling around before he roasted himself alive. Vegapunk continued, saying his second great sin was tied to a mysterious century, the one that existed between 900 and 800 years ago. He explained there's a massive gap in history during that time. Imusama started sweating harder than a sinner in church when he heard that part. The Celestial Dragons ordered the Marines to shut down the broadcast immediately. Vegapunk was about to expose the truth of the Void Century. The nobles screamed that a simple death sentence was not enough for him. They wanted him to suffer. Vegapunk calmly said that the only way to uncover the truth of the Void Century was by deciphering the ancient poneglyphs scattered across the world. Giant Saul laughed proudly, saying the world was finally about to learn the truth. In Orangetown, a little girl said that long ago, 20 kings united to create the world as it is today. But Vegapunk questioned if that story was really true. He explained that deciphering poneglyphs is strictly forbidden by the world government, but even as a government scientist, he chose to risk everything to pursue that knowledge. Back on Egghead, the Straw Hats were relieved that Monster Saturn had left. Lilith guessed he must be terrified of Stella's broadcast. Robin was stunned to hear that Vegapunk had deciphered multiple poneglyphs using the books salvaged from Ohara, and the old man said he never once regretted it. In the lab, Edison was barely hanging on, all beat up but still turning a crank, mumbling that he was almost there. Vegapunk continued, saying that everything he discovered was only a fragment of the true history, and it would be wrong to fill fill in the blanks with mere speculation, so he would only reveal what he was absolutely sure of. Then Vegapunk revealed the centerpiece of his story, the man who lived 900 years ago, a warrior with a body that could stretch like rubber, much like NIKA, the sun god of Elbaf mythology. And that man's name was none other than Joy Boy. Luffy lands a massive punch right in the boar's ugly face, but ends up burning his hand again, and the giants are laughing their heads off. Vegapunk's voice echoes, Joy Boy was the very first man on the seas ever to be called a pirate. Over in Wano, the samurai were tuned in to the broadcast. Kinnaman was shocked that their country could even receive a signal from the outside world. Turns out it was thanks to a Den Mushi they swiped from Orochi. Everyone there said they wanted to see Luffy again. The man's such a legend, they even raised the Straw Hat flag over the capital. At G4 prison, Killer asked if this Joy Boy guy was stronger than Captain Kidd. Kidd puffed his chest and said, "Of course not. Relax though. That was just that chubby faker who pretended to be Luffy back in Sabati. Some folks really make a living pretending to be other people, huh?" The round dude bragged that he could definitely beat this so-called Joy Ball. Vegapunk went on, saying the poneglyphs he studied mentioned a great war long ago, a war where Joy Boy fought against what is now the world government, and Marcus Mars was still tearing the lab apart trying to find that transmitter no matter what it took. Vegapunk said Joy Boy's crew was so powerful, it forced the entire world government to unite, but no one knows what caused the war. Vegapunk believed it was a clash of ideals, not good versus evil. He revealed that Joy Boy came from a civilization so advanced it would make even today's science look like cave painting. Carrot asked if Joy Boy had any connection to Zunisha, the giant elephant. Vegapunk explained that the weapons from that era were beyond anything human hands should have been able to build. Foxy refused to believe a word of it, but the long-nosed blonde just said, "Whatever, I'm starving." Vegapunk said even a genius like him couldn't replicate those ancient weapons, and that was the real problem. Back on Egghead, Brook was calling for Jinbe and Zoro. They needed to find a way off the island fast. Then Nami freaked out because suddenly the clouds started moving. Brook guessed that this must have been Edison's final plan, adjusting the island's descent so they'd crash into the sea instead of splattering on the ground. Lilith was still panicking about that tin can Edison, but he just told the Straw Hats to run no matter what. He said they must not let the world government capture them, no matter the cost. Stussy got a call from Edison, who sounded like a dying toaster, telling her to drop the barrier and get out of there. But she said she was not leaving until the Straw Hats were safe. Tinhead told her the barrier was useless anyway. It could not stop the monsters storming the island, so the same shield that was supposed to protect them was now trapping them like rats. Meanwhile, Saturn and Marcus Mars were walking through the lab, frying every Den Mushi in sight with Conqueror's Haki. Edison said he had done everything he could to help the Straw Hats escape. The rest was up to them. Stussy was relieved, saying Stella would hate her if they failed, but Edison told her Stella would never hate her and ordered her to run. Still, the girl was lost like an ex after a breakup, saying she did not know who to live for without Stella. Outside, Jinbe apologized for being late, but Zoro told him to man up because everyone was in a rush. Nami overheard that and said she was going to beat him up herself. She screamed for them to hurry because marine ships were already surrounding them. She did not want to get blasted the second they hit the water. Down below, Atlas was devastated by Stella's death, but there was no time to cry. Too much needed to be done. Kashi and Oimo were wrestling with Baldi Nusjuro, and Sanji came flying in with a flaming Konkasei that could melt steel, but the old man blocked it mid-air like it was nothing. Sanji threw a couple more flaming kicks, but Nusjuro countered with a clean head smash that sent the cook flying like a broken drone. Kashi grabbed the horse by the tail to hold him still while Oimo and Bonnie charged to crush him, but Nusjuro blocked them both easily and launched them away like toys. Then he kicked Kashi and lunged at Bonnie, ready to slice her in half. Everyone froze, especially the simp of the century, but Frankie swooped in at the last second, saving her from becoming sushi. Nusjuro's blade only cut through the front of the giant ship, and Bonnie shrank back to her child form, completely drained. The warriors of Elbaf yelled that they could not lower their guard against that monster, but then he suddenly galloped away through the sky. Meanwhile, Vegapunk continued his message, revealing that the Void Century ended with Joy Boy's defeat. Nusjuro bolted off to shut down the broadcast once and for all. Vegapunk said Joy Boy's fall left behind damage so massive it could never be repaired. Nusjuro was furious, calling humans insolent vermin, and with one monstrous slash, he split Egghead Island right down the middle. Stussy fell on her back in shock, and everyone on the island watched as it broke apart before their eyes. The world government was losing its mind trying to stop the transmission. The island's floating base collapsed, sending everyone falling through the sky. The CP0 agents hit the ground like pancakes. Back on the broadcast, Vegapunk said what is obvious now was not so obvious back then. The world had already sunk once during the Void Century. What remains today are just fragments of the ancient continent. The revolutionaries were stunned. The world from 1,000 years ago was buried under the sea, and if the oceans keep rising, history might repeat repeat itself soon. And of course, beauty runs in the family, because Nami's sister looked absolutely stunning while saying she had no time for this nonsense and went back to her tangerine farm. Vegapunk said that in just 100 years, sea levels rose by an incredible 200 meters. The Marines were speechless. Their own warships were barely 60 meters tall. No wonder the world could be swallowed whole so easily. But the captain ordered his men not to listen to that criminal. In Mocktown, people were laughing so hard they were crying, saying Vegapunk's stories just got more insane by the minute. In the Sakura Kingdom, Chopper's hometown, King Dalton asked if it could really be true, while Dr. Kuroha laughed, saying she liked this young scientist. He sure knew how to drop a bombshell. Out in the desert, the former Baroque Works agents stood near a 200-meter mountain, realizing how many lives must have been lost if the seas really rose that high. Vegapunk said the logical answer would be a natural disaster, but he was convinced it was man-made. Morgans panicked, and Vivi had to shut him up to keep listening. Vegapunk explained he had studied every field: climatology, geology, meteorology, and more, and all the data proved it was impossible for sea levels to rise 200 meters in just 1 century naturally. Then, after predicting the next rise, he finally confirmed the cause. The ancient weapons that once sank the world 800 years ago still exist, just waiting to be reactivated. In other words, the Great War from the Void Century never actually ended. Imusama was fuming after that revelation, looking like he was about to turn the whole world into ashes. No one could believe a word of it. How could a war that no one even knew existed still be going on today? Inside Imu's creepy castle, he stood before a painting of a woman who looked suspiciously like Vivi. She was most likely Queen Nefertari D. Lily, one of the 20 monarchs from that lost century. Vegapunk apologized to everyone, saying they had the right to know the truth, while the curly-haired royal bawled his eyes out over Vivi's disappearance. Vegapunk explained that his dream was to create an endless source of energy that could push humanity forward. And though it was not perfect yet, the Mother Flame had just reached the point of stability where it could finally be used. It was a source of energy that could enrich lives around the globe, but a small fragment of it had been stolen. Back on Egghead, the Marines refused to enter the island to rescue the CP0 agents. The whole place was on fire. Stussy shouted that everything was shaking and asked what happened. Edison, barely keeping himself together, said the labosphere had collapsed, meaning he could no longer send the floating clouds to help the Straw Hats escape. He warned that another one of those bald old freaks was heading their way and begged Stussy to run for her life. She asked if she could at least release Kaku, since both he and Rob Lucci were about to take the blame for the failed mission. Edison apologized for forcing her to betray her comrades, but said she could do whatever she wanted as long as she promised to survive. The blonde cried her heart out, but still smiled through the tears. Vegapunk continued, explaining that 2 weeks after the Mother Flame was stolen, a blinding flash was seen over the kingdom of Lulusia, and soon after, the entire country vanished from the map. The girl who had escaped from there could not believe it. Someone had really done that. Vegapunk said that as a scientist, he could confirm that only the Mother Flame could have generated such destructive power. At the World Council, the kings were clueless about Lulusia's destruction and rushed to verify it. Vegapunk confessed that the flame he had created had been used to awaken an ancient weapon. He had no idea who did it, but he admitted he was partly responsible for the deaths of thousands. He apologized for such a catastrophic mistake, because now the same man-made disaster that once sank the world could happen again at any time. In Wano, Momonosuke freaked out, yelling that Pluton might be activated, until Kinemon smacked him with a headbutt, telling him to watch his mouth. Vegapunk explained that there were once 3 ancient weapons, and Joy Boy had intended to pass them down to future generations. He asked why Joy Boy would do that. Did he want the world to sink again? Who was good and who was evil? He said someday those answers would be revealed. Sengoku even started choking from how fast he was eating in shock. Vegapunk added that once humanity uncovers that truth, the world might drown again. The Void Century remains full of mystery, but some people already learned the whole truth: the crew of the Pirate King himself. The Marines were in total shock, and Akainu was about to blow a fuse because Vegapunk would not shut up. Crocus looked uneasy. After all, he was one of the Roger Pirates, and the people could not believe that such a dangerous secret had been in the hands of pirates all along. Meanwhile, York was panicking, confused about how Stella knew she was the traitor who stole the Mother Flame. The synchronization system was down, so he should not have known. She realized he must have figured it out using the data from Lulusia, and freaked out even more when she noticed the timeline did not add up. That meant he already knew what the world government was planning before it even happened. If that was true, why would he bother hiding the Den Mushi? Elsewhere on the island, Jupiter was hungry, and decided to slurp up all the CP0 agents like spaghetti. Then York contacted the Gorosei, saying she knew exactly where the transmitter was hidden: inside the Fabria Strata, protected by the Iron Giant Emeth, the same robot the Marines had been bombarding without leaving a scratch. Vegapunk wondered why those who learned the truth had vanished without telling anyone. At Shaggy's bar, she said Rayleigh had not gotten that drunk in years. The old man muttered that Vegapunk was talking too much, ruining the fun for the new generation. He said they deserved to enjoy the thrill of discovery just like he and Roger once did. Over in Hachinosu, the pirates were listening to Vegapunk's speech and immediately started losing their minds over all that talk about underwater treasure and sunken cities. One guy even started doing math like a madman, claiming there had to be gold 200 meters under the sea. His buddy instantly threw a bucket of cold water on him, saying not every ancient city is Shandora with gold lying around like loose change. Then another genius asked, what if we use a submarine? But they remembered they are broke. They can barely afford dinner, let alone a submarine. It would be easier to befriend a mermaid and ask her to go treasure hunting. Meanwhile, Mont Blanc Cricket had stars in his eye. The man decided he is diving again in search of the riches of the lost world. He spent years being called crazy for chasing Shandora. Now he can rub it in everyone's face. At the GS Marine Hospital, the Sword Squad was recovering from getting beat up in Hachinosu. While watching the broadcast, Helmeppo was already connecting the dots to the One Piece. And Hibari was so worried about Kobe she practically tried to heal him with kisses. Vice Admiral Kujaku returned saying the commander was getting better too, but X-Drake just wanted to be left alone. And Kobe said if Vegapunk was telling the truth, they were finished, so it was time for Sword to get moving again. On the broadcast, Vegapunk said he could not give more details because the rest was only his theory anyway. But everyone wanted to know what Roger found and never told a soul. The Straw Hats noticed the barrier had been disabled, meaning they could finally leave. Except several marine ships had already gathered exactly where they would land. Brook confirmed he had loaded the cola so the Sunny could blast its rocket fart into the sky. Nami asked where in the world Jinbei was, and it turned out he and Zoro were chasing the skeleton horse. Nami started cursing them, thinking they were running off the wrong way, but Jinbei yelled that the bald demon was headed straight toward the Sunny. When Nushiro raised his sword to slice the little ship in half, the squad froze. So Jinbei used some fishman jujitsu and launched Zoro like a missile straight at the beast. Zoro arrived swinging a Notoryu Rashomon, but the Gorosei blocked it. Their conqueror's haki was so strong, it was crackling like electricity. Nushiro realized the swordsman was using a Kitetsu, and the clash blasted them apart, with Jinbei catching Zoro like a baseball line drive. He shouted for the crew to fire up the Sunny and leave while they joined right behind. Down below, Bonnie yelled for Luffy to move faster while the Marines surrounded the giant ship. Vice Admiral Hound ordered them to blow the legendary vessel sky high. The signal was not working, so Sanji screamed for Luffy, and shockingly, the captain heard him and yelled back for them to set sail first because they were almost there. Dory and Brogy also ordered the warriors of Elbaf to raise the sails, getting ready to leave once and for all. The Marines tried to stop them by firing cannonballs everywhere, but they got smacked in the mouth by a giant arrow to remind them who they were dealing with. Even the pistols were huge, and what should have been simple gunshots turned into wrecking ball blasts. Vice Admiral Urban hyped his troops by yelling that those giants were nothing but dusty museum pieces. But those museum pieces were sending the young Marine rookies straight into panic mode. A horned lunatic jumped on top of their ships, hammering his axe down like he was redecorating with destruction, while the other giants were playing with the Marines like it was a battle between colossal titans and regular humans. The soldiers were shaking in their boots, but Bluegrass told them to toughen up because this was their moment to shine. She fired a laser that ripped a hole in the Elbaf ship like it was construction paper, and then Doll pulled up furious, saying the next hole would be right between their eyes. She charged her fists with armament haki and blasted Kashi with a rock and roll barrage. Now that is a real balanced fight. One moment Doll was throwing hands, and the next Kashi was getting folded. Seeing their Vice Admiral beating up a giant, the Marines got hyped and rushed in too. Meanwhile, Luffy realized Hakuna Matata had vanished. Since they were no longer being chased, they could return to the ship without trouble. The four horsemen of the apocalypse surrounded the Iron Giant that attacked Mary Joyce 200 years ago, and Vegapunk said he had one last message. But this one was only for those who carry the name D. The old geezers completely freaked out. Dragon just watched like always. Sabo thought about Ace and Luffy. Kobe thought about Luffy and Garp. Beepo thought about Law, and even Blackbeard stopped everything to listen to the drama. But right when Vegapunk was about to drop the bomb, Hakuna Matata slammed the Iron Giant with a headbutt so powerful it launched the robot upward like a volleyball. It knocked over the transmission Den Mushi, finally ending the whole circus. Nobody could believe he cut the broadcast at the best possible moment, and Emeth fell onto the Marine ships, blowing everything sky high. York sighed in relief because they pulled it off at the last second. The Marines started jumping into the ocean to avoid getting crushed by the giant robot, which began sinking deep into the sea, asking where Joy Boy was because he really wanted to see him. And the episode ends. Man, I cannot believe the broadcast stopped right at the most important part. The whole world froze because Vegapunk's broadcast died at the juiciest moment. No one knew if the signal dropped, the island blew up, or the scientist got whacked by Straw Hat Luffy. In Alabasta, people could not believe believe the world government would erase the greatest brain alive over that, but they already erased King Cobra, and now they are doing the same to Vegapunk. Leo believed every rumor and started thinking Luffy really iced the old man. Rebecca told him to stop being a cartoon sidekick, because that is obviously fake. On Egghead, Marines were shaking after seeing the five elders for the first time, especially in those demon forms that looked like nightmare cryptid. The geezers asked how many Vegapunks were still alive. York tapped into Punk records and said only Lilith on her floor and Atlas on the giant's ship, so the elders ordered those two erased immediately. All they needed was York feeding Punk record, and the death of Vegapunk would not slow them down. Meanwhile, in the lab, Kaku was furious with Stussy. He said he respected her as an agent, but to move aside because he would not stop Lucci when he came for her head. She ran off in tears. "Come here, I will give you a pity hug." Down below, Dory and Brogy celebrated like they won the World Cup, because they finally reached the giant's ship. Luffy landed with style, awed by the ship's size. Kashi had just eaten a beatdown from Dahl, and Luffy ran over to greet Kashi and Oimo, and immediately asked for food, because priorities. Meanwhile, Bonnie was living the meme with Dahl. Problem was, she turned into a kid along with Wrinkly Bluegrass and that Transformer giraffe of hers. Bonnie laughed at them, and the Vice Admiral ordered the squad to open fire. Sanji warned they had already set sail, and Nami confirmed they would slide down the clouds thanks to Edison's sacrifice, but they would need help to land. Of course, the Supreme Sim swore to protect Nami, Robin, and Lilith, even if everyone else had to swim. Usopp lost his mind because that list was all ladies, and Frankie only cared about the Sunny. Then, the real danger showed up. Marcus Mars tore through the sky ready to sink the crew. Meanwhile, Luffy had become best friends with the head chef and was eating the giant's 10-day stock. He told the cook to keep it coming because he needed serious fuel. Mars fired a flaming Kamehameha, and the giants raised shields to protect the insignificant humans. Easy there, bargain bin colossal titan. They barely blocked it, but the ship caught fire. Bonnie shouted to get Stella and Kuma out before they became barbecue. The Big Bird wound up another blast, this time to erase everything. But the drums of liberation started thundering, and Luffy yelled that he was finally full. Ships began bouncing, and Marines thought the ocean had started swallowing the world. But Luffy had turned the water itself into rubber, making everyone bowing like pinball. The question that will haunt science class: if the sea is rubber now, does Luffy bounce or sink? Dory and Brogy heard festival music in those drums and started dancing in the middle of the flames, because why not? Bonnie watched everything unfolding and could only remember her and her dad doing the NIKA dance together. She nearly jumped out of her skin when she saw Luffy in that form again. He invited her to help knock those monsters down, but she said she could not do it. Then Luffy said he believed in her strength, and the girl got more motivated than Sanji when there is a woman within a 5-mile radius. So she activated Distorted Future and literally began turning into NIKA herself. She yelled she was completely free, and Luffy cracked up shouting he knew she had it in her. Kuma just watched, chest full of dad pride. The two danced in the sky, laughing so hard they looked like they had chugged energy drinks mixed with jet fuel. The Marines froze harder than an old Windows XP trying to open Google Chrome. They could not believe there were two NIKAs. The elders needed to act before things spiraled out of control. Emeth kept sinking into the sea, saying he had finally arrived. Luffy and Bonnie laughed like clowns who slept in the circus tent. Marines screamed that Straw Hat Luffy looked exactly like his wanted poster, and Marcus Mars called them fools because two NIKAs were impossible. He said the second was just a trick of the age fruit. He charged up another terrifying blast, and Luffy came up with a 5-star genius plan. He said slicing or smashing would not work on the elders, so he turned into a rubber gas tank to take the full hit. Bonnie asked if he had chicken feathers for brains. The boys screamed for everyone to hit him with everything they had. Sanji and Frankie were ready to flatten their own captain, but Bonnie was horrified. Brogy shouted to stop the party and quit dancing, like he had not been twerking a minute ago. Luffy yelled for them to hurry because the pain was unreal. He grabbed Mars by the wings so he could not move. Sanji told Bonnie that the captain's orders were absolute and unleashed an insane Ifrit jumble. Frankie followed with a monster right hook. Then Bonnie charged a NIKA punch and told Luffy not to regret it later. Their attacks slammed into his back, nearly knocking him unconscious. Bonnie could not believe he was actually getting hurt, but he said of course he was, because those maniacs were using hockey instead of just nudging him for momentum. The two madmen told her to keep hitting him like she wanted to shatter every bone in his body. Bonnie's heart nearly leaped out her throat, but it was too late to back off. Rubber Monkey used all that force and sent the Elder flying to infinity, beyond, and straight toward Elon Musk's space program. Bonnie celebrated like she just won the lottery. It was finally time to escape. Luffy asked where the rest of the crew went, and Sanji said they must have already gone down. Atlas said something must have happened and blasted off like Superman to check, because York was tracking them and could be planning something. Then the Denden Mushi that fainted inside Emeth woke up hungover, and Vegapunk's broadcast resumed. But now he was rambling about inherited will, and no one understood anything because the most important part about the D was cut. Vivi was close to choking Morgans because he would not shut his beak. York said the mental waves were only cut temporarily, and to stop it forever, they had to destroy the transmitter. But how are they supposed to do that if Hakuna Matata threw the Iron Giant into the ocean and every elder has a devil fruit? Out at sea, Luffy looked up wide-eyed. He wished it was like Cloudy with a chance of meatballs, but instead the sky rained chunks of the island, Cypher Pole agents, and Seraphim. It was like trash fall from Gachiakuta. Everything dropped from above like someone flipped Egghead upside down. Luffy warned the giants that the eggplant-headed elder was spitting people out like Ash's Sceptile firing bullet seed. Then the giant sandworm started vacuuming everyone again, launching bodies into the sky. Even the colossal ship was getting dragged in, and poor Bonnie lost her strength. She snapped back into kid form and almost blew away, but Sanji caught her and instantly switched from flirt mode to protective big brother, absolutely horrified. Luffy was nearly pulled in too, so he turned Jew Peter's own pull against him. He puffed up a hockey-packed fist and smashed the worm's face with gusto. The giants roared, while the vice admirals had no idea what reality even was anymore. And as if two monsters were not enough, the raging boar came barreling back to wreck the Elbaf ship. They were totally doomed. Luffy was too far, Bonnie was out cold, and the giants were shaking like leaves. Then Luffy heard someone shout Joy Boy's name. Out of nowhere, the ships surged upward like a kraken erupted from the sea. The Iron Giant rose and delivered a colossal haymaker right into Warcurry's snout, hard enough to snap his horns. It remembered Joy Boy saying, "When the time comes, act." Everyone stood frozen, wondering where that Megazord came from. Luffy was losing his mind like the Joker after inhaling a phone charger and chugging hand sanitizer because he was finally watching that monster robot go to work. 26 years ago, before Punk Hazard became Todoroki's bedroom made of fire and ice, Professor Clover begged Vegapunk to research the lost century with him. The moldy grandpa tells him to cut the nonsense because he works for the world government now. Touching that topic is basically signing your own funeral papers. But Salad Head insists and reveals his real name is Clue D. Clover. His older brother was murdered right in front of him just for carrying a single letter in his name. He had to lie to survive, saying that Kid was just some dude. Vegapunk turns his back, pretends he heard nothing, and refuses. Then the old reckless fool says he will bring the truth to the world even if he dies doing it. 4 years later, the government announces that O'Hara is getting a Buster call as a Christmas present, and that clown Caesar was hyped to watch the disaster live. After the call of destruction, even the world government scientists could not believe they slapped a wanted poster on an 8-year-old girl. Months later, Vegapunk goes to O'Hara's ruins and cries for them, saying you must be incredibly foolish to die for the truth of the world. Funny how that works. Back to the present, Vegapunk says that only the winners get to write history. The losers have their voices erased. Robin breaks down remembering that nightmare. On the ship, Zoro is getting pissed, yelling that they need to leave before Baldy Nusjuro comes back. But Lilith explains that if that geezer interferes, the ship will be sliced in half faster than a watermelon at a ninja show. Out of nowhere, Atlas comes flying in and punches Lilith right in the face. The crew is speechless, wondering if she lost her mind hitting her own sister. Sweetie, York is the other one, by the way. Down at the shore, Vice Admiral Hound's soldiers do not know if they are awake or trapped in a fever dream because they are staring at Timon and Pumbaa, a Megazord, a worm-face freak, and a bunch of other abominations all in the same spot. Emeth calls Luffy Joy Boy and says he is happy to see him again. Luffy turns around like, who is this toaster talking to? The robot says he will fight by Luffy's side again because Joy Boy's enemies are his enemies too. The elders are losing their minds because that cursed robot will not stay dead, and Vegapunk's transmission refuses to shut up. The giants prepare to set sail, and Brogy asks if the big metal dude is on their side, but Luffy says he has no clue. The robot just keeps talking about protecting some Joy Boy guy. The giants are even more confused because the robot is clearly speaking, but they cannot hear a single word. Vegapunk says it is stupid to hear only one side of a war that happened 900 years ago. Jupiter gets ready to charge while Emeth raises his arm to fire, and the Three Stooges are hyped like they are about to watch King Kong vs. Godzilla live. The worm lunges, but the robot's Hadouken fizzles out because he is rustier than a car abandoned in the sea. Jupiter bites him so hard he almost swallows the robot whole. Saturn yells for the worm to shove it all down without choking. He uses the worm as a springboard and jumps straight toward the giant ship. The only thing on his mind is destroying Bonnie and Kuma. On the Sunny, they ask why Atlas attacked Lilith, but she just twists her sister's neck and begs the Straw Hats to take care of Lilith, because now she will do whatever it takes to make sure they get out alive. York is already celebrating because Lilith has been disconnected from Punk Records. Now only Atlas remains among the Vegapunks, but that airhead was tricked like a toddler with a fake cookie because Atlas only shut Lilith's ship off temporarily. Nami yells at Zoro to shove Lilith inside the ship because Nusjuro is charging at them like some deranged creep who just smelled free buffet. Zoro shouts at Brook to fire the galactic gas blast, and the skeleton gets to work. Right when Nusjuro is about to slice the ship clean in half, Atlas jumps in front of him and loses an arm, but she manages to open a path for the Sunny to take off. Everyone Everyone hangs on so they do not go flying away, but they are still wondering if they will even reach the ocean before turning into floor pizza. Nushiro asks if she really wants to sacrifice herself for those insects, then slices her for real this time. But she smiles, looking like a crushed soda can, and says she left a goodbye present for this bald freak. She explodes mid-air just like Deidara, and the Straw Hats cannot believe their eyes. But that explosion gives the Sunny the extra boost it needed to reach the sea. Can we already say Atlas is the MVP of Egghead, or is it too early? The crew is sobbing while that snake York celebrates being the last surviving Vegapunk. Meanwhile, Nusjuro is regenerating like Perospero after Pedro's sacrifice, and he says they still need to silence Stella, who will not shut up. Vegapunk explains that Gold D. Roger sailed the entire world and learned every hidden truth, and the prisoners in Impel Down ask why he called him Gold D. Roger instead of Gold Roger. Emeth manages to break free but loses his arm just like York. Any minute now, Shanks and Kid will show up so they can form the official No Arm Club. The robot says he is falling apart and has to use his special move. Then he tells Joy Boy he will finally use that power. On the giant ship, Saturn starts attacking Bonnie like a coward, but Dory and Bragi defend the girl. Luffy yells not to touch the claws because they are poisonous. But how do you dodge this freak throwing 50 punches per second? Luffy was about to attack again, but freezes when he sees Bonnie crying. She screams that she will kill that Saturn trash no matter what. The old scumbag tries to stab her but takes a punch from the rubber monkey instead. Now that is real observation hockey. Bonnie powers up again and says this is a future where she is completely free. Saturn panics seeing her in that form for the first time. She shouts that she is ending this scumbag's bloodline today. Luffy hypes her up like a UFC coach yelling about pizza for breakfast and dinner for a whole month if they win. Vegapunk explains that rare races have been hunted and exterminated for centuries because of these hidden truths. Races like Kuma and Whitebeard's Buccaneers, King's Lunarians, and even Pudding's Three-Eyed Tribe. All the giants cheer when they see the two warriors of liberation, but Saturn says she is just a cheap knockoff. Luffy dodges every attack in the air, and Bonnie uses the tentacles like surf ramps to gain momentum. She transforms into a gorilla and smashes him with a Thor hammer. The geezer tries to ambush her again, but Luffy is locked in with god-tier reflexes. The giants get hyped and join the NIKAs. Bonnie screams, asking how that worthless worm dares to do that to her father, and explodes with rage. She says her dream was simply to live as a family with her dad and mom. She even thought it would be easier to die than be alone, but she chose to live because that is what would truly bring her parents happiness. They literally did everything to make sure she survived that nightmare. Bonnie rockets through the air, preparing a final terrifying punch. Though someone should tell her to work on those triceps because those arms are hanging on hope alone. Saturn calls them insolent insects and uses the giants as stepping stones, but when he reaches the top, he is greeted with Bonnie's liberation punch straight to the jaw. Luffy smacks away all the tentacles, leaving Saturn wide open. Then the old parasite tries to headbutt her, but the two of them beat that monster simultaneously, making that contaminated worm regret ever being born. They tear him apart like a dollar store puzzle and leave him with more holes than a block of Swiss cheese. At least now he can officially rename himself to St. J. Garcia Strainer. And Kuma smiles, seeing his daughter finally become truly free. And if you made it this far, it's because you're a real anime fan. So I've got a gift for you. Have you ever thought about making money with anime? Getting thousands of dollars every month just to work with your favorite anime? Yes, it's possible. Just with my channel, I've already made over $100,000 this year, working from home, from the beach, and even from a hotel pool. And best of all, making videos about my favorite anime. And I'm about to do something crazy. Right here in the description of this video, I've prepared a video for you, explaining step by step how you can start an anime channel on YouTube today without investing a single cent, get tons of views, and also make big money with your channel. And the best part is, I explained everything like it's inside an anime world, so even a goblin could understand. So click the link in the description and go watch the video now, because I won't leave it up for too long, alright? Don't come crying later.
わらわが美しい